Okay, thanks again to Trish and the group of patient panelists, particularly for being so candid about their feelings and their stories. I'd like to introduce now Dr. Amy Abernathy to provide our call to action for the day. In addition to serving as a member of the Turning the Tide Advisory Committee, Dr. Abernathy is the Chief Medical Officer and Chief Scientific Officer at Flatiron Health, a healthcare technology company focused on accelerating research and dramatically improving treatment for people with cancer. She's a hematologist, oncologist, and palliative medicine physician, and internationally recognized cancer clinical researcher. She's also an appointee to the National Academy of Medicines, that's formerly the Institute of Medicine, National Cancer Policy Forum, on the Executive Board for the Personalized Medicine Coalition, and past president of the American Academy of Hospice and Palliative Medicine. Before joining Flatiron, Dr. Abernathy was professor of medicine at Duke University School of Medicine and directed the Center for Learning Healthcare in the Duke Clinical Research Institute and Duke Cancer Care Clinical Program in the Duke Cancer Institute. Along with Dr. Schwartzberg, whom we heard from earlier, Dr. Abernathy has been a passionate pioneer in patient-reported outcomes and their value to everyone. So she has the important task of summarizing our discussions from today so we can identify actionable next steps, which hopefully we will do with all the constituents that have joined us today following today's event. Amy.
Hello.
I forgot to mention also she's a good buddy.
So, in the last little bit, what I'm going to try and do is, summarize some of the remarkable things that have been said today and think about what does this tell us about what we need to do together next. And as I try and do this, I got to give you, I try to do something that I've never done before, so I'm going to stand up in front of you doing something I've never done before, and we'll see how it goes. PMC tweeted this. They reminded us that the reason that we're here today is to talk about patient-centered care and how we're going to move forward with the patient in the center of the conversation. Each patient's story is unique, and that's our starting point. And so over the course of the day, I've been listening and I've been trying to tweet along. So for those of you who don't know this, I've never really tweeted before until today. So I was sitting in the back learning. So I can't figure out how to get rid of my silly picture in the corner, so ignore that. It's like the @real Donald Trump. That's just like, ignore that. But as you can see, I was getting ready to go this morning, and I saw Len Lichtenfeld on Twitter, and I tweeted to him, and he tweeted back, and I was like, we're all on our way to DC. And then we started the conference. And we heard from Wendy Harfin that as a doctor, what matters less is what you say and more what patients hear. And the stories of patients and the stories of real people who are experiencing the real world of cancer every day of their lives actually framed the conference from beginning to middle to end. And I think that most importantly, we heard that every story is individual and different, and it's like personalized medicine and personalized cancer care. We have to think about how do we match the needs of the individual with what do we know today about best care and what do we need in the future about designing best care for patients and moving that story along. As we continued into the next session, what we heard was that a key part of the theme was the team. We heard about the importance of everybody from the phlebotomist to the caregiver to the oncologist. And here's a message from Dr. Schwartzberg about getting to shared decision-making within the context of the clinic. And he reminded us that we need health literacy, both of patients and of doctors, and we also need to help doctors navigate this complex space of personalized medicine and figuring out what works for patients when, and we need better treatments that work. And putting this together between what the patients told us about the need for individualized treatments for them and doctors saying, what I need is help in the clinic to be able to translate and make this happen, set up the stage for much more of our conversation. We then came to the next session where actually Dr. Hilliard served as both patient and psychiatrist bridge between session 2 into session 3. And session 3 was about value. And he said in session 2, increasing healthcare value must not be code for writing us off and leaving us for dead, But rather, what we heard in session 3 was that there was a whole bunch about the healthcare value conversation that is important for us to get right. Len Lichtenfeld reminded us that healthcare value in that conversation stops in its tracks if we haven't just figured out how to have the real conversation about access to care. We also thought about things from everything from the side of the employers and how employers are thinking about how navigating health to what is happening, for example, at PBMs and on the insurance side. Getting to value means understanding what works and for whom, and also how we're going to make that feasible within the context of constrained dollars and cents. As I said, we went from patient stories in the beginning, middle, and end. And Joan London was an inspiration as she told us her story. And one of the things that I thought was most important about her story was the importance of learning, right? What she told us in multiple ways is that we learn as patients and as citizens. Interesting about her story. She learned from Dr. Susan Love about the importance of ultrasound and incorporated that into her own story. And she also was trying to demand, how do we bring that evidence to society at large? At the end, Dr. Shilsky asked her whether or not she had been involved in a clinical trial, and she said, no, I endorse them, but she also mentioned, but I was treated with a treatment 5 days after it was discussed at ASCO. This is about evidence and translation into practice. Kathy Giusti, as she discussed with Bill Dalton the work that they've been doing at the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation, talks to us about the importance of data and how patients will contribute data if they understand the why. The other thing that I thought was so remarkable about that talk was the importance of looking across the ecosystem and outside of the boundaries of healthcare to all of the ways that the problems of creation of evidence and getting it to the people who need it is solved in technology and way beyond the boundaries of healthcare. Thinking about what's going on, for example, in the tech industry and how do we incorporate that. In the next session, then, we looked at what would it take to translate evidence into practice. And we need to generate tools and support evidence transfer into practice, including, for example, better evidence summaries, decision aids, and decision aids that are both to help doctors translate evidence, but also to help patients translate evidence. And Deborah Patt reminded us that we don't only need to do basic discovery, but we need to do health services research that helps us optimize healthcare at every single step along the way, including better workflows, incorporation of patient-reported outcomes, and understanding what works. And then, in the last session, what we heard is that patients deserve bipartisan policy to support scientific discovery, access to clinical trials, and the transfer of evidence into practice, and patients asked for this. So what's so interesting to me is that we had bookends of the day of saying, I'm an individual person from patients, and then as we think about how do we take care of the important people in our lives, we say, at the end of the day, we need policy that supports it. If I think back, there was also an important statement said midday by Lori from Pharma, where she said, in addition to treatments innovating and progressing, our reimbursement policy has to innovate and progress too. So in the last few minutes, what I'd like to do is talk about some of the things that I heard today as important next steps as we sit here in Washington and advocate for the patient voice in cancer care and how we're going to move forward in continuing to turn the tide. So first, we have to think about access. Man, oh man, has access to healthcare been the conversation of the moment? Not sure how these things are going to go for the next couple months, but certainly we need to continue this, and ideally we need to continue this as a bipartisan conversation. Alternative payment models and alternative payment pilots make good sense. Today is the birthday of the Oncology care model from CMS, 1 year today, and we should continue to innovate on how do we deliver healthcare in a way that optimizes for value and also optimizes for getting patients what they need. We need policies that ensure we include the patient voice. I'll tell you one quick anecdote. At Flatiron Health, when we were building software for the Oncology care model, in the original version of the model included patient-reported outcomes as a part of the quality measures. What we saw both at Flatiron as well as tech vendors across the country was when the OCM dropped the quality measures that included patient-reported information, the building of software for patient-reported outcomes at scale in the community went away. So if we line up our policy to include the patient voice, we will incorporate the patient voice directly in what we're doing. And we need outcomes and value-based pricing program, outcomes-based or value-based pricing programs that ultimately help to match the value of the novel therapeutic to what it means for an individual patient and if it's working. The second major category that I heard was we needed to generate patient-centered evidence. 2016 marked a remarkable piece of legislation, the 21st Century Cures Act. This promotes modernized clinical trials. It promotes real-world evidence as a part of the story, but importantly for today, it also promotes patient-centered drug design and the inclusion of patient-reported information as a part of our drug development process and discovery. We need to continue to innovate on therapies for personalized medicine. We need to look towards PDUFA 6 and continuing to think about how we make sure that the Oncology Center for Excellence gets funded. And we need to continue to work for access for clinical trials. Also, as Deborah Patt reminded us, we need innovative science and healthcare delivery research. Finally, we need policies that help to get evidence into practice, including technical solutions that make this feasible and policies that allow us to develop those solutions from a technical standpoint quickly, and solutions that support shared decision-making. These are the things that will help us, from a policy frame, continue to innovate within the context of cancer care and do so on behalf of patients. So with this, I look back to the beginning of the day, started off by George Dimitri, where he said, and really it was a paraphrase from the Biden initiative, cancer brings us all together across political, geographic, and other boundaries, and making us work together with urgency. And today, as we frame up the Turning the Tide version 3 initiative, we have that urgency working together. So thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you next time.
Amy, that was fabulous. Thank you again. There's a reason we always ask you to sum up. So I think that, first of all, I want to thank all the speakers for their participation today, as well as the teams from AACR, PMC, Feinstein Keene, and Cancer Care who put together today's agenda. And I think Amy has made it clear that we have our work cut out for us. Turning the Tide is 5 years old this year, and I think we're just starting to come into our stride. As a reminder, we want you to continue the conversation, watching for updates. The website is turningthetideagainstcancer.org, and the Twitter handle is @T3Cancer.